James A. Ramage Civil War Museum is a small, family-oriented museum located in Fort Wright, Kentucky.
It's a Civil War museum that features the time in northern Kentucky when the Confederate Army invaded and people rallied around to defend the area.
And what we know is that with Battery Hooper is that it was an artillery site from 1862 all the way up through the end of the Civil War in 1865.
Well, the museum officially opened to the public on June 30th, 2005. Now, prior to that, there was 2 to 3 years of work and planning.
Several of us got together and we all sat around and said, we have to do something.
The house that it's located in at 1402 Highland Avenue belonged to a family called the Stores. It was Fern and Sheldon Storer, and they had a dream. They had this beautiful 2-story house, 17 acres of land, and they envisioned that this would be a place where college professors could come to do their summer sabbatical.
Mrs. Storer lived here until shortly before her death in 2003. In the interim between Mr. Storer's death and Ms. Storer, she had bequeathed the property to the Northern Kentucky University Foundation.
We purchased the property for them, and it was kind of a win-win for all of us because Mr. and Mrs. Storer, they wanted the property to go to a use that would be educational in nature, or at least the proceeds would be applied towards education.
Acquiring this site because of its historical value and also some park and recreational value to our city was important. So the city acquired title to the property in 2003. So after that, we formed a couple of committees to decide how to make best use of this property. And our initial efforts were directed at trying to publicize the historical value of the property.
Sheldon Storer, he was aware that this had been an artillery site during the Civil War, and it was a location that was called Hooper Battery. Nowadays it's referred to as Battery Hooper. And all the local neighbors as well realized that something major during the Civil War had occurred here.
And it is on the site is a former Civil War battery.
So the city acquired title to the property in 2003. President Rotruba and the NKU Foundation people were very, very helpful in the city obtaining this at a very good price.
Once they had the property, it was, what do you do next? Because you've got a 2-story house that was built in 1941. It was, well, maybe we can do a Civil War museum.
And the thought was to perhaps use the house here that the Storers lived in. It's the only house on the property. It sits right in the middle of the property, and it sits right in front of the battery that was here 145 years ago. Perhaps this house could be renovated into a Civil War museum that could tell the story of the Siege of Cincinnati that you get in bits and pieces in other places.
What went from just an early concept where we had the initial meetings back in April and May of 2004, by the time we hit the fall of 2004, it was the reality of, yes, we can do a museum.
And we had to set a deadline. And so perhaps naively on our part, we said, we can do this in a year.
And so for a year, we researched the battery with history research and archaeological research, involved the community, involved 5th graders and high schoolers and NKU students. And we opened the museum as part of our project.
Finally, in 2005, it was a go. The city appointed its first ever board to the museum. And on June 30th of 2005, we opened. And then August of 2005, we did the formal dedication of the museum.